Grace Leong is a champion of PR and is the CEO and partner of Hunter Public Relations, the second largest food and beverage PR firm in the world. Grace has built her career in public relations by providing strategic marketing communications to national consumer brands and CMOs. She has held and received many positions and awards within PRSSA, including the International Conference Chairperson in 2014, a silver and bronze anvil, and in 2017, she received PRSSA NY's highest honor, the John W. Hill Award, for a lifetime achievement in public relations. Currently, Grace helps those who are earning their distinction of APR in the public relations industry. Dr. Childers Hon is a professor in the Department of Public Relations and Program Director for the PR and Social Advocacy Project at the University of Florida. Linda was Executive Director and Associate Dean of the college from 2006 to 2012 and has published many works that have been included in academia. She's the recipient of the 2001 Pathfinder Award for Best Recent Program of Research in Public Relations. Linda was an inaugural member of the Planck Center. Cheryl Bachelder is a passionate restaurant industry executive with over 35 years in the industry. She recently retired from serving as CEO of Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen. Cheryl is known for her crisp strategic thinking, franchisee-focused approach, superior financial performance, and the development of outstanding leaders and teams. Cheryl established a roadmap of results that has produced exceptional performance in 2015 with system-wide revenues at $3.1 billion. In September 2015, Cheryl was awarded the Norman Stanford Award from the nation's restaurant news, and she's been profiled in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and named by CNBC's Jim Cramer as one of his 21 bankable CEOs. Megan Newhouse is a global communications executive with experience across multiple industries. Regarded as a trusted C-suite partner, Megan has extensive and proactive reactive reputation management experience. Megan serves as the Director of Cultural Communications for GE and leads global efforts to empower and inspire employees around GE's business strategy. She does this by developing new ways to use digital tools to communicate and listen to employees. Megan has won numerous awards, like the Sabre Company Campaign of the Year, GE Works 2013, PR Week's Best In-House Team 2012, Reagan Best Executive Blog 2011, and PR Week's Young Professional of the Year in 2010. Now I'm excited to introduce our student leaders and fellow chapter presidents who will be covering the questions around today's topics. Bethany Corin, chapter president of the University of Alabama, will be covering the topic of mentorship. Trevor Rayhans, chapter president of the University of Northern Iowa, will be covering the topic of diversity in the PR industry. Lenny Tasconis, chapter president, Indiana University, Purdue University, Indiana, will be covering the topic of internship preparedness. And last but not least, Sydney Thompson from Ball State University will be covering the oh-so-important topic of networking. Throughout the panel, feel free to live tweet the wonderful advice from our honorees by using the hashtag #PlankMentor. Wi-Fi is provided, and I'm going to throw the instructions on the screen behind me here. So go ahead and log in, and then I'll turn the projector off so we don't blind the honorees. I know it's kind of hard to see. The password is ADANBELYPONS. And the username is Plank, like Betsy. ADANBE. All right, Sydney, why don't you take it away? No, I'm sorry, Bethany.
Hello, everybody. And without further ado, I would like to ask the first question. I'm sure you're all eager to hear. The first question that we have for you all should be pretty easy. If we were to seek out a mentor, what would you advise us to do as our first step? Anyone can start, or if you'd like, we can start down the table.
Can we start with a little bit of a prelude to this? Because I can't be in front of all you folks out there without saying that you have chosen a career path that can lead you potentially to one of the most rewarding and one of the most exciting careers that I can imagine. And I want you to have that, but also to know that what we do is terribly important in this role of communicating with the public, particularly in this day and age. I'm going to have more to say about that tonight. So I start off by saying I have enormous respect for you for making this choice. And I have no doubt that through the networking experiences that you will have and at dinner tonight, that you're going to find it quite natural and easy to get to know people. And that would be my first suggestion, would be to seek out these opportunities where you can meet professionals. And they don't necessarily, Pat, have to have the same age differential that you and Harold celebrate. In many cases throughout my career, it was contemporaries from whom I learned the most, and sometimes competitors where we would benchmark, and that is a mentoring kind of a relationship as well. And I think as you progress in your early days, you're going to find camaraderie and partners, within your own sphere, and develop relationships that will be important for you throughout your careers. So I guess the first thing is to seek out the opportunity to meet people, and when you get that, don't just talk to one another, but don't be afraid to interrupt any conversation, introduce yourself, and begin to make connections. You need to be a little aggressive about getting this started. Sorry if that was too long-winded.
Hello, everyone. What I'd like to do is build on what Bill just said. So I agree that you want to reach out to people across many different spectrums of what you're interested in doing. I would say, especially to this audience, utilize social media to help find mentors. It doesn't have to be just in a business environment. It doesn't have to be just in the confines of a networking opportunity. I've had a number of people reach out to me on LinkedIn who have looked at my profile and have found some things that are, for whatever reason, of interest to them. And some of them I've met, others I probably never will meet. But there are many different forms of mentoring, and tonight I'm going to talk a bit about that. But I think you need to think beyond just the traditional mentoring where you're sitting across the table from somebody once a month, and think creatively, because that's the environment we're in, and that's certainly the world that you all are accustomed to, probably more than my generation.
Hi. Well, I'm the only professor on the panel, so mentoring, I think of education as really mentoring is the job, and I would echo what you've already heard. You have to not be shy about reaching out to people. And I think one thing that you should realize is that there's a lot of reverse mentoring that's going on these days. I really, really enjoy working with younger people. They teach me a lot, so it really is a two-way street. So don't be shy. Again, look for those opportunities. A lot of networking and mentoring, I think, can happen through working on projects together. It doesn't have to be just sort of the uncomfortable, kind of cold calling or meeting people at a special event. The more involved you are, I think the more opportunities, obviously, you'll have to meet people. But again, do think of it as a two-way street. And, as somebody senior in the field, I really value that relationship because my students teach me so much. So again, please, don't be shy about reaching out and looking for opportunities.
Yeah, I would just add on to be just really, really tactical. There's the resume and the experiences that people have when you pick a mentor. That's obviously impressive and worth looking at, but I would say you'll learn a lot of the skill side of it in your job, right? So I think also look for a mentor whose style is somebody that you think you can learn from, who sort of navigates tough situations, right? Who's a natural leader, who finds opportunities to make things better. I think there's probably a lot of style things that I've learned from my mentors that have taken me and helped me a lot in my day-to-day, almost more so than the tactical of how to do a project or how to do a piece of something to do with communications. So I would say look for style. It doesn't have to be a communicator. I've got a lot of really great mentors who have different positions across industry. So.
Yeah, and I would agree with what everybody's saying. And just like we look at communications plans, have a target. I remember when I was an undergraduate at the University of Delaware, and I was a PRSSA student, and I read my textbook, and I read about a woman named Barbara Hunter, and she was the first woman in the country to own her own PR agency. And the more I read about her, the more I made her my target. She had the resume, she had the career, she had the smarts, she had the moxie that I wanted to learn. So I made her my target. And everywhere Barbara went, I went too. So if I saw her speaking at a PRSA conference, I did. I actually stalked her. If stalking was illegal back then, I probably would have been arrested. But she was my target. I didn't even know her, and I knew I wanted to learn from her. And so wherever she went, wherever she was speaking, I would go. I wasn't creepy, but I was definitely interested in her. And, of course, when I graduated, she was the first person I sent my resume to. And it took me about 3 months to get an interview with her, but I did it. It's because I researched my target, I understand who she was, and I got all the benefit. And then eventually I bought her firm, and she is my mentor. She has been my mentor. I own her firm now. So I had a target, I had a mission, and I got it done.
That's fun. Buy the company. I'd like to expand our view of mentoring from the more typical formal one-on-one relationship to many different varieties. I see mentoring as learning how to become a great leader, and there are many ways to be mentored outside of one-on-one meetings. One of my greatest mentors was Lou Gerstner, who was the CEO of IBM. I learned tremendously from watching him in action. He was probably 2 layers up in the organization. I journaled everything that I learned from observing Lou Gerstner. I'd also ask you to be mentored by people close in to your current position. If you're entry level, be mentored by a manager. If you're a manager, be mentored by a director. We often target high, but we don't always target close to our current action. And there is so much wisdom to be gained by someone just 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, as well as the big, bold targets like we just talked about.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any more details to add? Well, I think those are all really great tips that we can all use, perhaps starting tonight. Perhaps not the stalking, but other than that. It worked. My next question actually has a lot to do with what you said, Dr. Hon. It's been said that mentor relationships are two-way. What can a college student-mentee do to facilitate two-way mentorship? And this time maybe we'll start here.
Sure. I thought that was a great question when I read it earlier today. I, too, enjoy the two-way conversations and mentoring. One way, particularly coming straight out of your academic programs, you've been really close to reading on contemporary topics. You've been studying recent case studies. You can bring a lot of insight. The one problem you have in senior executive roles is you have 0 time. So you can bring new ideas and learning that you've read from your classroom activity.
I think I would echo that and say, come with questions. Don't just expect the mentor to expound upon you and give you all this great advice. Have questions. And maybe look at some of your work and present it to your mentor and say, this is my work. What do you think about this? How would I do this different? And then look at the mentor's work and comment back to that person as well. We actually like to hear when people say, I read your case study about this. Did you guys think about doing that? That's really good because, as Cheryl just said, you are learning so much in your classrooms that we want to extract from you. And at the senior level, it's very difficult to be very tactical in that learning. And we rely on you guys to mentor us back as well.
Yeah, I would build on that and say sometimes the questions that you might find to be like, maybe this is a basic question. It might be something that your mentors just don't sort of run in the same play they've run, and they haven't taken that step back to look at that question. And by you asking it, you might actually give them a different perspective on what they're doing. Because sometimes you just get in the habit. You just sort of run your play, and then it's not until someone questions, well, why did you do it that way? That you're like, well, I don't know. Why did I do it that way? And then you can kind of have that debate. So I would say definitely bring that question and sort of play it off your mentor.
It's hard to add on to those wonderful responses. I think a lot of mentoring relationships, there's usually some sort of personal chemistry, but there's also a lot of shared interests. So I think you should tap into those shared interests and then be a resource for each other. My students and I, we share articles, we share case studies, we share links to news stories, because we tend to have many of the same passions and interests. So I think there is, again, an element of personal chemistry, but my experience has been that the most satisfying mentor and mentee relationships are when you really do have the same or many similar interests and passions. So you're always kind of looking out for one another in terms of sharing resources.
I'm going to give you a real-life example of how this can work and is certainly working in my life. So 4 years ago when I came to Astellas to build a brand new department, I put something on Facebook about we're looking to hire dozens and dozens of people. And you can imagine I got dozens and dozens of resumes, which is great. And in particular, there was a young man who was a senior at Penn State, very active in PRSSA, who really caught my eye as far as the questions he was asking me online about what we were doing, what we were building. We were so intrigued with him that we brought him in, even though we didn't have any entry-level positions, for an interview. And a few months later, we hired him. Today, he is in London running media relations for the company at the age of 26. And he is somebody that I spoke to this morning on the way to work. I spoke to yesterday on the way to work. I learned more from him than he will ever learn from me. He's making me relevant. He's making me honest. He's making me humble. I knew we had a winner when I was emceeing a senior management meeting with our CEO and president. And he came up to me after, and without even thinking about it, he said, "You screwed up. You said something that you shouldn't have said." He was, I think, 24 at that point. And it took me aback to start with, and then I realized that this was somebody who had the courage and the conviction to make me better, and he was somebody that we were going to invest in. So I just share that with you that, again, it gets back to what I said earlier in the first question about the power of social media. But you never know where these relationships are going to lead, and people like us, we need people like you. We need people like you to call us out when we say something we shouldn't, when we do something we shouldn't. Your generation is much more bold than my generation was, and I appreciate that.
I'd like to add to that, and this question took a little different direction than I expected, but I'd like to start out by saying, to kind of echo your thought, that you already have an extraordinary asset in your possession, and that is that you are younger people, and you know how to communicate with your peer group. You may have seen the story in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. It was on the first page. It said, mentors wanted, only millennials need to apply. And it was an affirmation of the fact that we are going through an extraordinary period of change in our society in the United States, but globally as well, I should add, where the baby boom generation is dying out or retiring, or in other words, disconnecting, and we have now a new bubble appearing on the horizon that is the target of, so much expected change for the better in society. Everywhere I go, I'm on the board of trustees of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We're a $10 billion endowment. I have a consulting relationship with a major food company. Everywhere I go, people are saying, we're asking ourselves, yeah, but do we know what we're talking about? And there is need to tap into your generation and to get your input. So I would start off by saying that don't be shy. Recognize that this is a precious asset that you have. And I think, frankly, the Planck Center maybe needs to do a little thought in a different direction. That is, how can they help prepare you for this kind of a role? It's not just enough to say, well, here I am, and this is how we think. But you need to do a little bit of work at first to kind of analyze the target of some of the relationships that you might form, and try to anticipate what the questions would be. And I think that through some organized work through the Planck Center, that would be a great way to add to the value of this asset that you already have. Believe me, it's precious and it's in great need. We just haven't figured out yet quite how to tap into that and to make the right connections.
With that, thank you so much for all of your answers. Speaking of change, it's time to change over to our next subject.
I'm going to turn this off like I promised.
I'm just going to grab the mic here. Well, hello. I will be switching gears now and talking to you guys, asking questions about networking. So my first question is, networking is critical in our field, as you all know, but it can be intimidating at times. So what are some tips and tricks that you have learned or mastered to combat the fear of networking, especially if you're going to an event where you don't know anybody? And then if we could have your responses, if you could speak into the microphone so everybody on Facebook Live can hear us as well.
I love walking into a room where I don't know anybody. I think you sort of have to have that spirit about it and be prepared to, make great discoveries, to meet, terrific people. I don't quite understand that fear, although one of my daughters has it, and she said to me when I went to PRSSA in Boston, and I love going to PRSSA because I've practiced for 40 years, and I know so many people professionally, but I go to PRSSA and I don't know anybody because they're from all over the country. And it's terrific just to go from table to table, introduce yourself, and begin making friends. And I saw a lot of young people doing that. It's a bit of risk, but, we're all in the same boat. Nobody's going to lock you up for interrupting a conversation.
Well, I have the opposite reaction when I walk into a big room. So one thing that some of you in the audience who know me might find hard to believe is I'm actually pretty shy. I grew up in a very remote rural area in a farming town where basically all the other inhabitants in the farming town were relatives. So or four-legged, that's right. So until I went to college, I really didn't know a lot of people outside of that area. So even today, even after all these years, I still kind of struggle when it comes to going to a big meeting where I may not know people. But I've got a couple things that I do that has helped. First of all, a lot of the networking sessions you may go to will send you a list of who else is coming. And inevitably, there is somebody on there that may be a friend of a friend. Again, this is where LinkedIn comes in. You see somebody on the list who may be a friend of somebody that's on the list. Or you get a list from past years, and you call and try to make that connection. But the other tip I make, and I'll probably even do this tonight if I can, is there's nothing more unsettling to me than to go to a networking event, especially a cocktail party, where you're supposed to be conducting an intelligent conversation with spinach in your teeth. So I try to eat before I go to these things because it's very difficult to do what we're there to do if you've got a plate of food in one hand and a drink in the other. I'll always have the drink in my hand, but the plate, not so much. So what? Yeah, no, I just brushed my teeth. I hope so.
But don't drink too much because that can make the networking event very difficult. I too tend to be a little shy. I don't recall too many situations where I didn't know anybody, and I do think there's so much information available now on LinkedIn, and even on my Facebook, I have so many professional contacts. Before I go to a conference, I always check, and hopefully I'm updated on people. But I think something that I've learned is generally the most accomplished people I've met are also the most humble. So don't be intimidated. You have a lot to offer as, again, this new generation of aspiring professionals. So try to remember that. And I think that, again, we keep saying don't be shy and be aggressive, but, senior people and or even people, at mid-level, because I thought that was wonderful advice about seeking out mentors at the mid-level, too. We're all human, and we are excited about meeting you as well. And, again, it has been my experience that the most accomplished people are actually the most humble and really easy to talk to, and delighted that you did.
Go ahead. Yeah, go for it. I mean, when someone does that to me, I go, hallelujah, someone's talking to me at the networking event. Woo! No, I mean, honestly, I seriously, I'm telling you. I think just say that. Just say, sorry to interrupt you. I know it's sort of weird, but I wanted to meet you. I'm so-and-so. I mean, that's it, right? And then just move on. I think if it's, for me, going to a networking event, I think I put all this pressure on myself. I'm like, I'm going to meet these people. I'm going to impress them. They're going to remember my name. I'm going to get this gig. It's like way too much pressure, right? Just go in there and say, I'm going to meet 3 people, and I'm going to learn one thing from each of them. And if you make it like I'm going to learn from them, it takes the pressure off of you, and I think it makes it a little less awkward of a conversation, because if you're trying to get your whole life story out in like 5-minute networking session, that's a lot of pressure. And I think for me, I get up there and I'm like, hi. Like, and then I like forget my whole life story. You know, so it's like instead, just, you know, tell me about your job. Why do you do that? How do you, it's sort of, and then naturally it'll start a conversation, but it takes the pressure off you. So that would be sort of my tip. And then if it's a little weird, just acknowledge it. And then, you know, it sort of breaks the ice and you move on. You know, I think most comms people are pretty happy to move on from those kind of situations. So.
Yeah. So 3 tips. Everybody who works for me knows that I don't like going to industry events, and I force myself. The hour before I'm going, I'm a monster. I'm like, I don't want to go. No one's going to talk to me. I don't know anybody. And my staff's like, you just go. You're gonna get so much out of it. So I have this rule: meet 3 people. And my staff who's here, they know. We walk in, meet 3 new people that I haven't met before, and then the pressure is off. And then you can actually enjoy the event. And when you meet those 3 people, it's transformative. You really don't think you can do it, but you can. And to your question about it feels weird to walk up to somebody, there is some work that you have to do. Like if you come up to me at the PR Week Awards event, and you just stand in front of me and say, hi, and expect me to talk to you, I'm not going to know what to say. So come up with an agenda. I keep saying this. Always have a target. Always have an idea. Have 3 cocktail party questions always in your back pocket. I saw your award yesterday. I read this about your firm. What do you think of global warming? Whatever it is. But come up and open it up, because immediately I know that you're not just going to put all the pressure on me to make you relaxed. You're helping me relax too. There is work in networking. Even though you see us as older than you and maybe more mature and experienced, I expect you to do some work with me too. You know, I have an agency. I have 120 young people who work for me, and I network with them all day long. Why should I network with another person outside of my firm? You have to invite yourself in by being interesting, being interested in something. Hey, how about those Yankees last night? If you're at a New York City event, what do you think of the Yankees? What do you think of that PR move they did? Open it up with a shared experience, and then the pressure's off both you and me. But know that networking is work. You just don't pay your money and go to the event and expect us, because we like you, to talk to you. You have to be interesting, and that's your responsibility.
So last week I was at an event. We were talking a lot about courage, which I think is some of what's behind this conversation. And if you examine yourself when you're anxious about something, fear is usually about you. And I'd encourage you to think courage is about others. So when you're entering a room cold and don't know a single person in the room, don't be preoccupied with yourself. Be interested and boldly step forward to meet and get to know these people in relationships. All these suggestions are wonderful ideas for questions. The only thing I absolutely hate when a student walks up to me is when they ask for help before they've expressed any preparation or interest in what we're doing as a company. You know, you have to earn the right to ask for help. You have to start with the relationship first. But just thinking of us as people, That's all we are. We're like you. We have interests. We have passions. And if you ask us about them, we're pretty likely to talk.
Well, thank you so much for your responses, and I will pass it off.
Hello. So I'm going to be talking about diversity. My question is, the PR industry is changing, and diversity is very important. And we've fostered diversity over time. But we all know that there's work that still needs to be done. And so what do you all believe are the next steps in that so we can continue to progress in diversity?
I'm a big fan of the word initiative. And so I think if you have an interest in contributing to diversity, take initiative. One of the things that happened at Popeyes that I was so impressed by is our women formed a leadership affinity group, got speakers, decided what they wanted to learn about. They went after learning and leadership and growth, and the next thing you know, more women are getting promoted because we see them, they're visible, they're taking initiative. And I really believe that's possible for every aspect of diversity, is to own it, step forward, and be proactive.
Yeah, I mean, diversity's been a problem in our industry for a long time. I think the men-women balance is much better than it used to be in the days of Barbara Hunter, when she was the only woman who ever owned her own PR firm. The diversity I worry about is diversity of race, religion, and that's really, I think, the core issue. Years ago, I was on the PRSSA Foundation Board, and I think one of the best things we did on diversity is that we went into high schools and established career academies at the high school level for kids in the inner city environments to be exposed to communications careers. And by doing that, the research showed us that if you don't get to a kid and expose him to a communications profession, journalism, communications, they're never going to choose it in college or even go on to college. So I was really passionate about that program. I have 4 children of my own. They all are in high school. They're in college now. And, you know, they never heard about communications in high school. They heard about sciences, and they heard about math, and they heard about athletics. They never heard about journalism. So I was really passionate about this program because it got to the kids early. And the program's no longer running. It was underfunded. But I feel like it's a responsibility for you guys. You are closer to high school students. You are their peers right now. It would be great if you guys went down one step and became mentors to people who you know that are in your diverse set of friends and family, and start talking to them about how passionate you are with your communication. You are the most diverse population we have seen in so long. None of you are pure black, pure white, pure Asian, none of you. And this is an opportunity, I think, for you to use your relevance to reach down and be mentors and bring diversity. I think it's kind of too late for some of us up here. There's very few mentors at the highest level that model that type of diversity. Your diversity. You're the walking embodiment of it, and I'm relying on you guys. We'll fund you. We'll help you. We'll send you in. But I think you're much more of a credible example of how this industry does better with diversity.
I'm with her on that one. No, I was going to say, I mean, my example is going to be what I did in school. Was we went out and we had a program with the high school. We went to Syracuse in upstate New York, and it was on a variety of topics. It was basically skills that we thought you needed for life. So communications, presentations, run the gamut of skills. And it was one of the most rewarding things I did when I was in college. And also, I think, hopefully, it sparked a few people to have interest in what we were doing. So it wasn't a formalized program. I like your approach much better. If we could make it a formalized piece, or maybe part of PRSSA overall, to Bill's earlier point, but I think that's a great way to start. Great. Well, yeah.
But they're everywhere for you. They're in your churches, they're in your communities, they're in your friend group. So whatever work you do, it just doesn't have to be at school or in your professional driving career. if you're involved with a church, if you're involved with a community organization, if you're volunteering at the hospital, you have an opportunity to showcase you as an excellent communicator and bring people in to the magic of communication by example. You know, you guys look to us to set examples for you to be mentors. You are now setting an example for others, and you don't even know it. So don't just think about your professional silo as the only place where you could bring diversity into this communication field. Every conversation you have with a coach, with a church group, with a community group is your opportunity to show that you are, you know, a diverse woman working in this industry, and look at you, and you'll create role models behind you just by acting and showing up.
Well, at University of Florida, we found it starts with high school, too. We have a director of multicultural affairs who spends a lot of her time in high schools in Florida and beyond. But since we already talked a little bit about that, I wanted to make another point. I think we need to, when we talk about diversity, also talk about inclusion and how we create an environment of inclusion. If we have diverse hires, how do we retain them? How do we really create an environment of inclusion? Last week at University of Florida, as you probably know, we had just a terrible event with Richard Spencer coming. He hijacked the campus. It was pretty much deserted. People didn't feel safe going to classes, or faculty didn't feel safe coming to work. And I was really proud how the students responded. The students created a campaign for caring and a campaign of love. I actually did go into campus that day. I was scared, but a long story. There was an event that couldn't be rescheduled, and I needed to be there. And I remember driving through, and all the fraternities and sororities had banners, love, not hate. There was a UF hashtag campaign. So again, I think it's that environment of inclusion, and you know, we're living in tumultuous times, and it was really an unprecedented event, and I think we're still processing, what happened and why and where we go from there. But again, I think it's diversity also has to include inclusion, and to make sure that our work environments are places where people feel welcome.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the biggest issue we have on the corporate side right now is that we're doing a pretty good job of recruiting diverse employees, but we're doing a terrible job of retaining them. And it's because corporations are still, by and large, run by older Caucasian men in many cases. My company happens to be based in Tokyo, so I spent a lot of time in Japan. And in Japan, diversity is totally different than it is here. In Japan, we're working to get more women hired because that still is not where it needs to be. But our offices in Europe, our offices here, our headquarters just north of the city where I work, we're really working hard now, once we find the diverse population to bring in, to do everything we can to make them feel comfortable, to make them feel safe. Like a lot of corporations, we've started a number of employee resource groups. We've got a very large LGBT group. We've got an Hispanic group. I head up the group of people living with disabilities, and we've got over 100 members of people with a number of disabilities, from mental illness to autism. So corporations, I think, are finally realizing that it's in our best interest to be a reflection of the people that we serve. I work for a healthcare company. We are selling cancer treatments for a wide spectrum of people that go across the entire spectrum of humanity. And we need to get better about understanding those populations, because it makes good business sense, in addition to making sure that we have the best and most robust workforce we can.
This is a tough subject to discuss always. We did the same thing at Johnson & Johnson with the affinity groups a number of years ago. We actually encouraged Asian, African American, whatever stripe they chose or color, to form, and we provided company space, and we encouraged, celebrations and events, and it seemed to work pretty well for a while. I don't know if it continues now. I've been away from the company for 13 years. What I wanted to share with you is what I discovered after I retired and I got on the road. I went to about 18 colleges and universities all across the country to talk to young people about the communications career and to share experiences, but, you know, to try to encourage the best and the brightest to follow this pattern. And I was amazed that almost every class I went into, you know, the ratio was about 90% women. And I learned by talking to students that there were two huge distortions at the time, and I think they continue today as they affect young men of all colors. Number one was the appeal of the financial services industry and the idea that as a young person you could make a lot of money really fast and have all those toys that you want. And the other distortion is the world of sports and sports broadcasting and organized team sports with salaries that are just, you know, not related to anything that's real anywhere else. I have found in my experience that you can't sit back and wait for people to come to you. You have to go out and find them. And where I run into people of color especially who are doing another job that, you know, involves communication, articulation, they're poised, they're presentable, I go up and talk to them about diverting their career interest and opening up a conversation about what this field is all about. I think we have to be very purposeful about it. A friend of mine in New York complained to me that there were a number of highly qualified African American people who came out of the Obama administration, and he said, where are they in corporate America? You know, they may have had different kinds of jobs, but were they actively recruited? Bill, you might be able to add a comment or two about that, but I think we have to be very purposeful, and I think we have to be aggressive, and we have to make a determination that we're going to do this. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to be talk forever. What's been your experience?
Our reaction to, just for everybody's frame of reference, I run an executive search firm. Use the microphone. Oh, sorry. I run an executive search firm that specializes in the world you all work in, which is corporate communication and public relations. I'm sensitive to everything that people have said here. So number one thing I would say about diversity and inclusion is we're seeing far more intention on the part of our corporate clients. Now, we work in a world of confidentiality, so therefore we can't necessarily say to you exactly what that intention is, but you can figure it out from this conversation. That intention is for the workforce to be more diverse, and therefore the clients will be a little bit more patient with the search process to find the right kind of diverse talent. And then with respect to what you said, Bill, about the people in the Obama administration, I would say as a generalization, you're going to find, you find less of it today because, sadly to say, under the current administration, companies are acting on balance much more conservatively. There's a much more of a sense of fear about when they bring on talent. But that'll pass. It does. There's cycles with this. And the cycle is that companies, J&J being a great example of this, by the way, that tend to be more courageous, to use your word, Cheryl, that tend to be a little bit more bold, will look at that talent that you're talking about, Bill, and bring that person on board and figure out a place to put them. But then it gets into Jeff's point, which is, okay, now that we've got that talent, how are we going to make sure that that talent stays and feels really empowered to succeed at this organization? And if they don't have role models in the organization, if there's, you know, a sort of a culture, if you will, of passive aggressiveness, that is to say, when the person isn't highly successful minute one, people start distancing themselves from that person because they think that there's some kind of a contagious disease that they have, that they're not going to be successful in the company. So there's a lot of hard work that has to go both externally and internally to make that work. Thank you.
Thank you. We do need to move on to the next topic, so I'm going to hand it over to Lenny.
Let me just add, I think that we need to have more conversations like the one we're having right now, because we all need to have an easier time talking about this. That is going to help build our confidence, develop the right words, and really convey a sincere sense of desiring inclusion in our ranks.
So we're going to talk a little bit about internship preparedness now. So the question that many of us have is, when applying for internships, what is something that you all look for that makes a student stand out, whether it's articulating their participation in PRSSA or any other kind of extracurricular thing, or something that they've done that makes them really stand out. So what would you guys say?
I look for specific examples of leadership, and it doesn't have to be in your field necessarily. PRSA is a great example, but you could be president of a club on campus, you could be active in a sport, a leader in a sport. Leadership is the single highest thing that correlates with results in business, and so find ways to talk about everything you did in your life and career and school career as a leadership example.
Yeah, we have a pretty robust internship program at Hunter. Please apply. But there's lots of competition out there, guys. There really is. We had 660 applications for our summer internship. We pick 4 interns a year. And the ones that stand out, yes, they all have what you're saying. They have the experience, they've taken the classes, but if they're sitting and interviewing with me, which sometimes they get to do, because I really do believe in the internship program, is you have to convince me that you're going to work harder than I do at my job. I don't care if you're the president of this, the king of the athletic field, you've taken 4 classes with Ron Culp and got A+ in each one of them. What I'm looking for is for you to bring your work. I'm hiring you to work. And so I want you to demonstrate that you're going to roll up those sleeves and going to give me as much as I'm going to give you. An internship is two-way. You're not just coming to learn, I want to learn from you. So before you tell me about all your wonderful things that are on your resume, I've read those already. Tell me how hard you're going to work at my company and what I'm going to get out of you being one of the 4 to join my staff. It's two-way.
I would say for me, so I work at GE, and I've worked at GE my whole career, 10 years, and I joined GE as an intern, going to my senior year of college. And the way GE, at least for our company, thinks about internship is it's definitely a college. It's like a really long college job interview for us. So if you take it summer internship going to your senior year, it's essentially a job interview. So we approach our internship interviews the same way. So I would say when you're preparing for an interview, know the company that you're interviewing with. I know it sounds so silly, but GE makes big badass machines and the software that goes on top of them. FYI, if you interview with us. But know the company, because I think a lot of folks come in and they're just so excited to talk about their experiences. They don't know who they're talking to, right? So think about what's relevant, what's their most recent campaign, what's their most recent activity, what's the most recent award they've won, and show that you're in it, that you're part of that fight and part of that passion. And then we also always look for folks that can figure it out. So they have some personal experience where they've had it faced with a challenge that was hard, and they figured out how to solve for it. They didn't necessarily get permission from a professor or from another leader. They just figured out the solution and sort of got it done. That's sort of a trait that for us at GE in particular we really look for. So I would say think about those kind of opportunities that you've had, whether they're formal leadership roles or just things that you've done, that you can demonstrate that.
Well, I don't hire interns, but I work with a lot of students advising them on getting internships and jobs. In fact, it's kind of coincidence that I've been spending the last few days meeting with some students about this. And, this point has really already been made, but inevitably what I find is their cover letters and their whole approach is very I, me, mine centered. And I tell them, think about, every organization has priorities, get to know the organization. Most organizations have a strategic plan right on the website. Where are they going? What are their goals? And what value can you add to them? Okay, so just thinking again of that two-way street, but really thinking about the value that you can add and where is the good fit. And sometimes hires are just a matter of having a good fit, that this person can help us move forward with our goals. So again, trying to take it off, not so much I, me, mine, but rather, here is what I can contribute to your organization and why, and that you've done your homework and you understand where they're trying to go and how you can move that further along.
I look for in internships the same thing that I look for when I hire employees, and that's someone who is very well balanced. There are a lot of great people with a lot of great skills out there, but I want people that work hard and also play hard. All too often I ask this question whenever I interview anyone: what do you like to do when you're not working? And many times, and I've gotten some really interesting answers, including one where I had to call the head of security, quite honestly.
Too honest. Don't be too honest.
But many times, especially with younger people, I get the answer, well, I'm always working. I have no time to have other outside interests. I have lots of outside interests. I love what I do when I'm not working. I love what I do when I'm working, but I'm energized at work because of what I look forward to doing when I'm not at work. So don't be afraid to talk about your hobbies, your passions, the sports you're involved with, because if you're interviewing with people like me, they're looking for somebody that's very well-rounded and not somebody who's going to be working 100 hours a week.
I'm afraid I have a sickness that you don't have. It seems like my whole life has been 36-hour days, and that's driven largely by my passion for what we do. It seems to me it's pretty easy to devote the extra hours if you're trying to solve a particularly difficult or interesting problem. What I look for in interns or people who I might send on to Johnson & Johnson or some of the other companies I'm involved with is, are they good listeners? Do they listen carefully and do they hear clearly? That's very important, because that is the heart of the next most important characteristic, which is the ability to learn and to learn quickly. In public relations, public communications, whether you're in an agency setting or in a corporate setting, your day is never what you expect it's going to be. Things drop in, a phone call may introduce you to a problem about an issue that you know absolutely nothing about, and yet within 30 minutes or so you have to be in touch with lawyers and public affairs people and begin crafting some kind of a reaction or a response statement. So it's this ability to quickly engage, to grab the facts and to have a curiosity about the situation that we're facing. The other component that I have preached my whole career, and it's especially relevant in values-based organizations, is in times of crisis, the first issue is what happened, and then the next step would be, well, what are we going to do about it? But I put an intervening step in there. It's based on what we know or we've discovered. What do we think about what we've learned? And that brings in the values question. How are our values going to inform our decision about what to do next? I look for those kinds of qualities in people, and I find them a lot. I really do. I mean, I think there's particularly in younger people who don't carry a lot of baggage when they come into these jobs. They genuinely care, and they genuinely want to do a great job. They don't have kids in high school. They're not worried about losing the job. It's a whole different dynamic. So I hope that's helpful.
Could I make one last point about internships? The people you've just heard from on this panel would run a really good internship program. But I will tell you there are many companies that don't.
Yeah.
So you could land an internship even with a great name company and be really disappointed that they have you filing papers all day long or something menial. So I want to encourage you, get in the door, no matter what, like they've discussed, but then find something that they have never had the time to get to or to do that could add some real value in the 8 or 12 weeks that you're there, and surprise the daylights out of them with the value that you add. No matter what, low-level work they've tossed your way, you can find a way in that time frame to really create some excitement and some value around your contributions. And I wish everybody took it as seriously as these folks do, but they don't, and I want you to be ready for that.
Thank you all so much. I think they deserve a round of applause. I hope you guys learned as much as I did.
I was thinking that there's probably enough money in the room. We could just organize a company of everybody who's in this room, right, and be very successful.
Well, thank you very much again. Students, we are going to head to the Xeno Group reception after this. Oh, I'm sorry. We are now going to open up for Q&A. And make sure when you raise your hand that I pass the mic to you. That way the people on the Facebook Live can hear what's coming through the room.
Hi again. My name is Megan Clarkson. I didn't introduce myself, but I am with the IU Northwest PRSSA. And I meant to ask you this with the first question, but so you guys are mentors, obviously, and that's great, but what's so rewarding about it? Like, what do you guys feel out of it? Do you get like a fulfillment, or do you get like some type of joy, or I'm just curious about that.
Yes. No, it's terrible. No, I'm just kidding.
We get paid.
Yeah.
One of the things you find as you become older is really the only legacy you leave in this world is the impact of your life on someone else. So mentoring is one form of that, and it's very satisfying to think that the day that I retire, I might leave behind some leaders that will take it forward.
I think that's right, and I think that increasingly, and I'm going to talk about this tonight with such a disruptive society that we have today, I see really the skills that we have as representing probably the greatest hope that we have to find a pathway forward and to help rebuild public trust in our institutions and in the organizations that we represent. Mentoring in that context takes on a very high level of importance. We absolutely have to bring along a new generation of women and men who share our values and who share the importance of what we do. It's just very, very important. So it's very satisfying to see capable people, move into roles and to be successful.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alexandria Hockey. I am with the University of Illinois PRSSA chapter. My question is for Bill. First of all, I wanted to start off with thanking you for your service to our country. I wanted to know how taking on your leadership role at Johnson & Johnson was for you only 7 years after the Tylenol crisis that Burson, of course, did a very good job with. But I was wondering, going into that leadership role with that still in the background, how did you tackle it?
I said no 3 times when they asked me to join. I absolutely loved the agency environment and was, prepared to spend the rest of my days there. But Jim Burke, who was the CEO at the time, tackled me. I got to know him because the agency Hill & Knowlton by then. My company, Carl Bayer, merged with Hill & Knowlton. On the day of the announcement of that merger, J&J called and said they had an assignment that Burson could not handle. They wanted to give this account to us, but they wanted a senior executive to look after it. And I was picked because I was running our New York operation for Carl Bayer. And I went down there, and it turned out to be the compound that became Splenda. And so I led the team on the agency side to develop all the public affairs support we needed to make the FDA filing for approval. And that's how I met Jim Burke, the CEO, who called me in one day, and he expressed to me his great concern about this product. And they'd already spent $300 million in the development of it. I asked him what the concern was. He said, we're the baby company. We're known for safe, gentle, mild. And here we are about to put a compound that does not exist in nature in the food supply without lifetime. And, you know, babies and other kids are going to eat this. And so he said to me, and I'm an agency person, he said, I want you to go through all the studies. There were 123 at the time. And I want you to decide whether or not you would let your children consume this product. And if you think you don't want them to consume it, you tell me and we won't launch this product. My esteem for him went through the roof at that point. So when we started talking about, you know, coming into that organization, I had a much more open mind to doing. I did not move in the leadership role. I worked for Larry Foster, who created the function 60 years ago this year at Johnson & Johnson. And then I was, when he decided to retire, I took over the top spot. I got to tell you, I never looked back. I mean, what more could you ask for to go to work at a top communications role for a company that had an extraordinary reputation? You know, my challenge was to protect that reputation and make sure that we didn't, if we had another Tylenol-like episode, that we were able to handle it. And I've said many times since, if it were to happen today, it would have a totally different outcome, because in 1982, with the first poisoning incident in Chicago, which killed 7 people, the company had the luxury of saying for 8 hours to the news media, we don't have a comment yet because we don't have the facts, and we'll call you when we do. Larry's media relations policy at that time is, we're going to tell them what we know, and we're not going to tell them what we don't know. And it was as simple as that. You know that an event like that today, you'd be tried and crucified within the first 30 seconds, and you would never get that back. That represents a huge challenge. But I'm sorry for going on and on about this, but I still have a lot of Johnson & Johnson blood in my veins that I can't get rid of, and I own a lot of stock. For me, a values-based company, the credo that is so much a part of Johnson & Johnson, just perfectly framed for me, in my mind, the importance of what we do in our function. I saw it for the first time not as a vertical, project-oriented, but a horizontal effort in any well-managed organization, and I have seen firsthand the opportunity we have to make a truly lasting difference in society, many times in life and death situations. I feel blessed. Sorry, my wife doesn't like me to talk like that, but I feel that way.
Thank you all for your time. My name is Megan Finucane. I'm a senior from Purdue University and the chapter president.
Where are you? Oh, there, okay.
So, because you all are very successful in your careers, how have you been able to keep your brand relevant? And Mr. Nielsen, you had referenced this a little bit, but just staying ethical and, successful throughout your career, leading you to where you are now.
Is that a personal brand question? Are you asking? I'll start just to get us moving here. I think you asked maybe the single most important question, because if you come into the marketplace and don't have strong values that are going to anchor your decisions in business, you stand to get not only tossed around, but you stand to go down wrong paths and lead your companies down wrong paths. So I'm a huge proponent of knowing your personal purpose or calling in life and knowing the principles that it sits on. And I realize you're young, but as soon as you can get to some sturdy ground around those things, you'll be better ready for the kind of leadership challenges. You do get challenged, similar to the Tylenol one. At Lifesavers Candy, we made a package that students all of a sudden started biting on, and it would pop off with force and lodge in their throat. That only had to happen one time before Lou Gerstner said, I'm sorry, we need that off the market tonight. That conviction has to be in you before the incident happens, for you to make the right decision in the moment of choice.
I would say that you need to be very selective in who you surround yourself with. There are a lot of good people out in the world, but there are a lot of other people that might lead you in a direction that you don't necessarily want to go. So it's one thing that I learned early in my career, to try to size people up and to determine who those people are you want to be in the trenches with, because this business, you need people you can trust in the trenches. My friend Rosemary Yankosik is here, who you'll hear from tonight, is someone who I've been in the trenches with at 3 different companies over the course of 25, 30 years. And she's a prime example of what I'm talking about. Once you find those people that you can trust, don't let them go. Learn from them and keep them close by, because one thing that I think all too often people don't realize with mentoring, it doesn't need to be this onerous, formal program. We're mentored each and every day on an ongoing basis. And so just watch people and listen to people, and you will start to determine who the types of people you want as role models are. And then, again, stay close to them.
I think you guys have to realize, and I keep saying this, just because we may be 20, 30, 40, 50 years older than you, doesn't mean that we've figured it out. Right now, you are mentors. You are someone is looking at you, someone admires you, and you have a responsibility to lead by example in everything you do. Responsibility starts now. You're in college. You're separated. You're emancipated from your families. You are your own brand today. That diploma doesn't make you a professional. You are a professional today. So there's no magic date by which you cross over a line and become a leader. If you lead every day, you are a leader. And what do leaders do? They live and work by example. So be the leader you want to follow. And then people will follow you, and then you will follow the same vein. But don't wait. Don't think, oh, at 30 I become a leader, or 35, or 26 and a half. You're leading now. So what qualities, what responsibilities? Imagine always someone standing behind you when you're making choices in your classes. Should I study for that exam? Should I go to that PRSSA event? Lead. Who's watching you? Someone is watching you. And if it's not, it's your shadow. It's your Frankenstein behind you watching you. So impress your Frankenstein. That's your job. That's what leaders do. We are leading for others. We don't lead for ourselves. We're trying to set an example. And in everything you do, your personal and your professional life, you have to show that responsibility. So when you post on your Instagram yourself at a party with a red Solo cup in your hand, think, who's going to see that? Am I leading by the example? Is that the leader I want to follow? Your personal and your professional brand are the exact same thing. There's no separate you. It's all you.
Can I add a little dimension to what you're saying? I agree with you totally, and I'm saying this all the time to younger people. Ask me, it's not just leadership, but how do you become a consultant, or how do you, how do you get to a place where you can really provide counsel? And the answer to that is a lot of what you're saying. I encourage young people, and particularly people at your age, in anything that you do, don't just run on to the next project. At least take a moment to turn around and look at what happened and try to take the learning out of that experience. What did you learn from that experience? And you'll find that if you do that over time, that begins to form the basis upon which you're going to make recommendations. And it is the basis of your own self-confidence about who you are, what you know, what you believe, and what you're capable of. And self-confidence, I think everyone would agree on this panel, is ultimately the key to success. We don't have the decisions of old judges like lawyers do to back up our points of view. We don't have the rules of accounting to govern what we do, or you go on and on. The only thing we have is sometimes a queasy feeling in the pit of our stomach.
Every day.
And we make a decision based on that feeling and our experience as to what is the right thing to do. And then we have to have the strength of our convictions to stand our ground in the face of a lawyer who will say, Nielsen, you're going to cause the stock market to drop tomorrow, which I did at one point, 17%. And to carry forward with the strength of your conviction is one of the most important aspects of career development that I can think of.
That's a great note to end at least this discussion, to be continued. We want to leave a little bit of time for the students to meet and say hello to you individually before we end. I also have some housekeeping chores, but before that, let's give the panel a great thank you. Well done. Great counsel, and the challenge we offered up at the beginning to get this thing trending, been trending first since we started this at 3:30. So congratulations to each and every one of you.
In which direction was it trending?
Yes, right. And most of you are quoted somewhat in context. Okay. The forms, please fill them out. They're very important. If you like what you did today and you want to do more of it, we really need your feedback. So please fill out the form. I also wanted to remind people, Bill Nielsen earlier talked about how Planck Center can really help in so many areas, including on internships. Please go to the Planck Center website. There are lots of resources there, including a guide on internships and how to land them and how to act in the interviews, etc. So download that information free of charge to all of you. The other thing, and you've seen them around all the time today, we really spend a lot of time putting this together. When I say we, it really means Jim Motzer. So let's give Jim a thank you. The other thing, those of you going to Zeno tonight, you're in store for a really fun time. Beautiful offices, and they're serving you dinner. The rest of us are going to go to the Planck Center ceremony. I wish you could all be there. The thing's been sold out for the past 2 months, but it will be live streamed, so be sure to watch it. It'll be available through the Planck Center website. What else, Brooke, do we need to know? You're leading the troop over, correct? Very good. So you know where Brooke and Lauren, I think you're also going. Good. Perfect. Thank you all for coming. Again, let's thank our special guest today. Thank you.